Hi friends, I am Romila Lemos, Assistant Professor from the Department of Forensic Biology, Institute of Forensic Science, Mumbai. Today's topic of discussion and learning is about wildlife forensics part 2. I am presenting this topic on behalf of Ms. Deepika Bhandari and myself. We will be covering the following modules. Module 1, Protected and Endangered Species of Animals and Plants. Module 2, IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. Module 3, Other Conservation Agreements. Module 4, Illegal Trading in Wildlife Items. Module 5, Collection, Preservation and Transportation of Wildlife Forensic Evidence. Module 6, Identification of Physical Evidence. And Module 7, Identification of Pug Marks. Module 8, Conclusion. Let us begin with Module 1, that is the Protected and Endangered Species of Animals and Plants. Any species of plant, animal or other organism that is at a risk of extinction because of a sudden rapid decrease in its population or a loss of its critical habitat is known as an endangered species. Previously, any species of plant or animal that was threatened with extinction could be called as an endangered species. The need for separate definitions of endangered and threatened species resulted in the development of various categorization systems, each containing definitions and criteria by which a species can be classified according to its risk of extinction. As a rule, a range of criteria must be analyzed before a species can be placed in one category or another. Often such categorization systems are linked directly to national legislations such as the United States Endangered Species Act or the Canadian Species at Risk Act. In addition, regional agreements such as the European Union's Habitats Directive and international conservation agreements such as the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals or the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wildlife, Fauna and Flora, that is the CITES, are connected to species assessment systems. One of the most recognized independent international systems of species assessment is the Red List of Threatened Species created by the International Union for Conservation of Nature or IUCN. In Module 2, we will be looking at the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. It is one of the most well-known objective assessment systems for declining species in the approach unveiled by the International Union for Conservation of Nature IUCN that was established in 1994. It contains explicit criteria and categories to classify the conservation status of individual species on the basis of their probability of extinction. The list recognizes several categories of species status such as extinct, a designation applied to a species in which the last individual has died or where systematic and time appropriate surveys have been unable to log even a single individual. Extinct in the wild, this is a category containing those species whose members survive only in captivity or as artificially supported populations far outside the historical geographic range. The third is the critically endangered. This category contains those species that possess an extremely high risk of extinction as a result of rapid population declines of 80 to more than 90% over the previous 10 years or 3 generations. A current population size of fewer than 50 individuals or other factors. The fourth category is endangered. This is a designation applied to species that possess a very high risk of extinction as a result of rapid population declines of 50 to more than 70% over the previous 10 years or 3 generations, a current population size of fewer than 250 individuals or other factors. The fifth category is vulnerable. This is a category containing those species that possess a very high risk of extinction as a result of rapid population declines of 30 to more than 50% over the previous 10 years or 3 generations, and a current population size of fewer than 1000 individuals or other factors. The sixth category is the near threatened species, that is a designation applied to the species that are close to becoming threatened or may meet the criteria for threatened status in the near future. The seventh category is the least concern. This is a category containing species that are pervasive and abundant after careful assessment. The eighth category is the data deficient, a condition applied to species in which the amount of available data related to its risk of extinction is lacking in some way. Consequently, a complete assessment cannot be performed. Thus, unlike the other categories in this list, this category does not describe the conservation status of a species. The ninth one is the not evaluated one. This is a category used to include any of the nearly 1.6 million species described by science but not yet assessed by the IUCN. In Module 3, let's take a look at the other conservation agreements. The United States Endangered Species Act in the United States, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service of the Department of the Interior and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the Department of Commerce are responsible for the conservation and management of fish and wildlife resources and their habitats, including endangered species. CITES, to prevent the overexploitation of species as they are traded across national boundaries, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wildlife, Flora and Fauna, that is CITES, was created by international agreement in 1973 and put into effect in 1975. Species assessment and management. The aim of these systems is to provide the general public, conservationist and non-governmental organizations as well as the media, decision makers and policy makers with comprehensive and scientifically rigorous information on the conservation status of the world's species and the threats that drive the observed patterns of population decline. WWF's initiatives to conserve species in India started in the early 70s when it supported the launch of the Government of India's Project Tiger. In 1997, WWF India's Tiger Conservation Program, that is TCP, began and was aimed at providing support to tiger-bearing protected areas. In 2000, a landscape conservation approach was adopted with the focus growing beyond specific protected areas. Currently, WWF India is addressing species conservation through field level activities in different landscapes as well as through direct interventions aimed at conserving a particular species. These programs focus on threats to wildlife and the issues surrounding these threats. Prominent among these are poaching, human-wildlife conflict, trade in wildlife parts, habitat destruction and legal support. The project activities are carried out at field as well as policy levels. They are mainly related to scientific information gathering, working with the local communities, NGOs and government agencies including the state forest departments. Apart from the mega species, that is the Royal Bengal tiger, Asian elephant and Indian rhino, WWF India also has threatened species conservation program since 2008 and includes species namely Nilgiri tahir, Asiatic lion, snow leopard, black-necked crane, smooth-coat otter, Himalayan quail, great Indian bustard, leopard, gharial, brow-antlered deer, golden mercier, Indian pangolin, Ceres crane, house sparrow and the Ganges river dolphin. WWF India sees some of the above and a few other species as critical to India's wildlife conservation for reasons that include the rarity of the species such as Himalayan quail as well as the cultural importance they have for the people. WWF India also encourages conservation-oriented action or research on species through its small grants program that began in 2011. Module 4 concentrates on illegal trading in wildlife items such as skin, fur, bone, horn, teeth, flowers and plants. Wildlife crime is a big business. Run by dangerous international networks, wildlife and animal parts are trafficked much like illegal drugs and arms. By its very nature, it is almost impossible to obtain reliable figures for the value of illegal wildlife trade. Experts at Traffic, the Wildlife Trader Monitoring Network, estimate that it runs into hundreds of millions of dollars. Some examples of illegal wildlife trade are well known, such as poaching of elephants for ivory and tigers for their skins and bones. However, countless other species are similarly overexploited, from marine turtles to timber trees. Not all wildlife trade is illegal. Wild plants and animals from tens of thousands of species are caught or harvested from the wild and then sold legitimately as food, pets, ornamental plants, leather, tourist ornaments and medicine. Wildlife trade escalates into a crisis when an increasing proportion is illegal and unsustainable, directly threatening the survival of the many species in the wild. Stamping out wildlife crime is a priority for WWF because it is the largest direct threat to the future of many of the world's most threatened species. Over the years, illegal wildlife trade has emerged as a form of organized transnational crime that has threatened the existence of many species across the globe. In India, it includes diverse products including mongoose hair, snake skins, rhino horn, tiger and leopard claws, bones, skins, whiskers, elephant tusks, deer antlers, shahtoosh shawl, turtle shells, musk pods, bear bile, medicinal plants, timber and caged birds such as parakeets, mynas, munias, etc. A large part of this trade is meant for the international market and has no direct demand in India. India has a strong legal and policy framework to regulate and restrict wildlife trade. Trade in over 1800 species of wildlife animals, plants and their derivative is prohibited under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. India is also a member of the CITES, that is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora since 1976. CITES is an international agreement between the governments that aims to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival. CITES works by subjecting international trade in specimens of selected species listed on the appendices to certain controls. In India, like many other countries, the problem is not the laws, but that these may be poorly communicated and just as poorly implemented and enforced. Often, positive efforts to address wildlife trade concerns are undermined by lack of political will and governance failures. There is an urgent need for knowledge and action to bring legal wildlife trade with sustainable levels and stop all the illegal wildlife trade that has threatened and even pushed many species towards extinction. Towards this traffic, a wildlife trade monitoring network and a joint program of WWF, the Global Conservation Organization, and IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, established in 1976, works closely with the national and the state governments and various agencies to help study, monitor and influence action to curb illegal wildlife trade and bring the wildlife trade within sustainable levels. Module 5 discusses the collection, preservation and transportation of wildlife forensic evidence. Let us look at the sample collection. The collection of samples for subsequent forensic examination is often the key to a successful investigation. All the effort in building a good case for prosecution can be undone if sample collection is not done properly. This may lead to contamination of the samples, thereby invalidating any subsequent investigations. Samples for wildlife forensics are as follows. Some of the samples that may be considered for wildlife forensic examination include hair, meat, blood, visceral organs, bones, feces. The basic underlying principle of sample collection is that the collection process should not in any way contaminate the sample. Thus, the specimen to be collected should be handled carefully and sterile gloves and equipment must be used by personnel at all times. Containers and other chemicals used for storage and transport should also be free from any contamination. Chain of custody is an important consideration in any criminal investigation. It refers to the sequence of individuals who have held custody of the various samples from the point of collection to when they were finally analyzed in the laboratory. This is important to establish that the samples were not tampered with at any point of time and thus the investigation is not adversely influenced in any manner. Lack of a clear chain of custody may jeopardize the admissibility of vital evidence that is crucial to successful prosecution. The Wildlife Forensic Sample Collection Kit has been developed jointly by Traffic India and Forensic Cell, Wildlife Institute of India. The kit helps the forest staff to collect samples in a standardized manner, analysis of which will lead to accurate investigation of the crime. This kit contains most of the equipment required to collect samples such as surgical gloves, a plastic pouch, screw-capped vials, an injection syringe, a scalpel blade, forceps, scissors, a slide case, a glass slide, silica gel, filter paper, measuring tape, etc. Also, along with the kit, Traffic India has produced a detailed manual on how to use the kit for collection of meat, skin, scat and blood samples of wild animals meant for forensic analysis. In Module 6, we will be discussing the identification of physical evidence. After deciding the search boundary, the investigating officer should systematically and thoroughly search the scene of occurrence. The time required to search the scene of crime varies considerably and depends upon several factors such as size and nature of the area to be searched, the complexity of the wildlife crime, the abundance or scarcity of physical evidences, weather and light conditions, Availability of support facilities and manpower. It should be ensured that at any cost or at any stage of investigation, physical evidences are not damaged or destroyed or contaminated. Some of the things to be collected are blood spores, cloth or other fibers caught on bushes, footprints, tire marks, cartridge cases, implements possibly used for carrying of the crime, places where the offender or offenders may have stayed or sheltered or laid an ambush in the forest. This could be above ground, on tree branches or so on. These may yield other supplementary information and may also be obtained from wrappers of cigarettes or BDs smoked, of newspapers in which food or any other item may have been wrapped, salt packets, etc. Apart from this, surface impressions created when a person walks on a hard surface such as a hard forest trail and leaves behind impressions which may be due to mud, blood or any other materials. Any soil or other particles that may cling to the shoes may be matched with the soil found at the scene of crime. The barefoot or shoe impressions found at the scene of crime are compared with the impressions obtained from the suspect. An inked impression of the sole of the foot or shoe of the suspect should be obtained with or without socks. The investigating officer should ensure that the scene of crime is photographed and detailed. These would include long, intermediary and close-up photographs. While conducting the search, the investigating officer should search the carcass systematically and thoroughly to collect physical evidence. This would primarily include any wounds, punctures, etc. on the body, any discharges from any orifices and any body parts missing, example claws, canines in case of carnivores or ivory, molars, tail hairs in case of elephants. Any abnormality or unique feature that may also contribute towards establishing the unique identity of the individual animal may also be noted. A UV lamp may be used to scan the carcass to bring out evidences which may be unseen to the human eye. This is especially true for fingerprints. Use of metal detectors. Wherever there is suspicion of gunshot injuries leading to death, the use of metal detector is highly recommended. This may lead to the discovery of any remains of gunshot, spent cartridges, etc. All the persons concerned with the crime, including the person who first noticed the crime, should be interviewed and their statements recorded. Let us take a look at the identification of pug marks. Pug marks signifies identity. It plays a major role in identifying a given specific animal in terms of its sex, age or size as well as total accuracy of the given individual species. Pug mark denotes paw print of most feline animals. Herbivore footprints are called as hoof marks, which are seen in deers or antelopes, or simply footprints as in elephants. Every specific individual has its own distinct pug mark and as such this is used for identification purposes. Most of the soft padded four-toed pug marks seen in the jungle belong to either the cat or the dog family. It is important to thus understand their distinctive features. Broad differences between the pug marks of members of the cat and dog families include: while claw marks are visible in a dog's pug mark, in cats, unless they are walking over slippery or very steep ground or startled, claw marks are generally not visible. In the dog family, except in the case of hyenas, the gap between the pug mark between the top of the pad and the two middle toes is distinctly more than what is found in cats. The toes are comparatively larger in the dog family. the pad comparatively larger in the cat family. Animals that run down their prey in a dog-like manner have large toes when compared to their pad size, whereas animals that catch their prey by stealth, such as in cats, have large pads when compared to their toe size. It is also possible to distinguish between male and female of a species, as well as to differentiate between the front and the hind pug marks using characteristic features of the identification. The best example is the Tiger census program, which is completely based on pug mark technology. It is very easy to count the animal in a very special manner. Sometimes bias may happen. Camera trapping, scat analysis or GIS application are the new advanced formula for getting total occupancy in a given forest environment. Similarly, pug mark is also helpful in tracking those animals that stray away from the boundary areas, conflicting with the human environment or create problems of their own because of injury. With the advancement of new technological tools and skills, it is easy to deplete a forest and make possible for declining the animal presence in the surrounding ecosystem services, and with the continued process leads to the decline of prey base in the forest areas, the wild animals moving towards nearby areas, resulting in man-animal conflict. Adult male tiger pug marks or MTPs forms a square, while female tiger pug marks, that is FTP, fits into a rectangular shape. Toes in male are rounded, whereas it is fairly elongated in the female society. Female pug marks length and breadth is 1.5 cm more than male tiger pug marks. The interesting fact is a tiger club pug mark, that is a TCP, is much similar with the leopard or wild dog's pug mark. The difference in wild dogs is summed up as non-visible claws. The toes are smaller and larger pads in tiger. Visible claws, toes larger and pads are smaller in dogs. It is also possible to identify species from the scat. For simple verification, leopard pads are smaller, have narrow toes and small in size as compared to the tigers. Digital pug mark technology or DPT is another new terminology based on the theory of pug mark technology. The method is used for estimating the specific individual species using statistical approach. Each animal leaves a particular set of pug mark while walking. For analysis, the pug mark is clearly photographed in a serial way. GPS, Global Positioning System, locations are taken from the first sight, stride and straddle measurements where an animal walked in a normal gait. Stride is the distance between two successive pug marks on the same side, while straddle is the perpendicular distance between the left and the right hind pug marks. The data is then calculated with the help of a software Pugmark 1.0, which totally eliminates human error. In Module 8, we finally come to the conclusion. Wildlife crime over the years has now turned into a transnational crime carried out by huge organized groups. The fight against organized transnational wildlife crime therefore requires a multidisciplinary, intelligence-led approach in order to disrupt criminal activities, that is, dismantle the criminal organization structures effectively and bring offenders to exemplary justice and deprive them of the process of crime. In effect, to demonstrate before the public that such crime does not pay and that the state is willing to go the extra mile to ensure that such criminal efforts will be targeted and destroyed. Wildlife forensics is one of the tools used for the curbing of these heinous crimes. The above discussed techniques of identification of wildlife crime evidences are thus globally essential to be understood and followed to diminish illegal wildlife trading. I will meet you soon in another session with more learning lectures in the episodes. So till then, keep learning. Thank you.